Good evening, everyone. We will call the City Council meeting to order for Monday, June 2, 2014. The first order of business is the roll call.
Estes. Peterson. Lewis. Doyle. Wright. Scott. Nordstrom. Roberts. Clayton. Lorente. We have quorum.
Thank you, everyone. And next we'll proceed with our invocation, and we'll recognize Scott Holgren from First Christian Church. You are welcome to participate, but not required.
Would you bow with me? Dear wise and loving Father, tonight I just want to thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here this evening, and we thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Father, we thank you for life itself, for the measure of health that we need to fulfill our callings, for sustenance and for friendship. Father, we thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Father, we thank you as well for the freedom to embrace you or the freedom to reject you. And Father, we thank you for loving us even so, from your boundless and gracious nature. Father, we know in your scriptures you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities because you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. And so tonight I want to pray for our mayor and for the various levels of city officials, and in particular for this assembled city council. And Father, I'm asking that you would graciously grant them the wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times. Father, that you grant them a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, that you give them a keen thirst for justice and rightness. Father, you give them confidence in what is good and fitting, that you give them the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement. And Father, that you give them personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. And I pray for the agenda that's set before them tonight. Father, please give them an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Rapid City. It's in the most blessed name of Jesus that I pray. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. We now have the adoption of the agenda. We do have one change so far, and that is the addition of item 140A, and that is to authorize Mayor and Finance Officer to sign Resolution 2014-59, which is a resolution to declare an emergency and authorize repair to the roof of Fire Station 6, which is at 1930 Promise Road on the south end of town. And we'll go to Alderwoman Amanda Scott for an additional item. Amanda.
Thank you, Mayor. May I have your indulgence? I believe there may be two other items, but I'd like to ask a question of Vicki Fisher and Mr. Wolsterstorff, please.
Okay, if it's to help put an item on, you
It
may.
is.
Go ahead.
Vicki, I'm not sure if you can answer this. I'm hoping Terry can. At Public Works meeting last week, there were two items under Community Planning Department, 14 VR 002 and 14 VR 003, that were passed on consent. Has there been something that happened as far as why they're not on the agenda for tonight?
Based on state law, once they come out of committee meeting, they have to be advertised, and it has to be 10 days after that before it can go. Therefore, we didn't have sufficient time. You'll see it at your next meeting.
And for clarification, what were those two items?
Oh, I'm
about?
sorry. They were vacations of right-of-ways. So it was, both of them, each of them, so
In the
they'll
Silver
be on
Street
the
area?
next one.
In the
Pardon?
Silver Street area?
One was Silver Street and the other one is Jackson Boulevard.
Very good.
So thank you. Thank you, Vicki. Mayor, I will yield the floor and there will be no other additions.
Good question. Anything else? Okay, we have a motion to approve. Okay, we have a motion by Laurenti and a second by Nordstrom with the addition of 140A. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will now head down front for the Veteran of the Month for May, Deanna Newharth, and if our Ward 2 council members could join me down front as well. In partnership with the Veterans Coordination Commission, we are pleased to present the May 2014 Veteran of the Month recognition to Deanna Newharth. Staff Sergeant Deanna Newharth is the primary instructor for the Airman Leadership School at Ellsworth Air Force Base. As a member of the ALS staff, she is responsible for helping train up 196 future supervisors and non-commissioned officers annually. She trains tomorrow's leaders in curriculum areas pertaining to leadership, management, communication, and the profession of arms.
She was born in Greenfield, Indiana, and joined the Air Force Reserves after graduating from high school. Staff Sergeant Newharth honorably served 13 years in the United States Air Force Reserves prior to becoming active duty as a jet engine mechanic. She has been qualified on multiple aircraft and engines such as the KC-135S Stratotanker, the E-3 AWACS, the B-52, and the B-1 here at Ellsworth. Other assignments have included Grissom Air Force Base in Indiana, Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, Aviano Air Base in Italy, Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, and Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho. In 1999, Staff Sergeant Newharth arrived at Aviano Air Base, Italy, and was selected as a paralegal apprentice. During paralegal training, she graduated in the top 2% of her class. In 2001, Staff Sergeant Newharth was assigned to the Oklahoma City Air Logistics Center, where she worked as an aerospace propulsion craftsman. She deployed 3 times for operations Noble Eagle and Enduring Freedom, where she served with the security forces. Staff Sergeant Newharth has been serving our country since 1993 with dedication and sacrifice. She believes in the United States Air Force, and it is evident when you hear her talk about the military and what she does.
Deanna is married to Terry Newharth, a retired chief medic. Month, and we thank you for your service in the U.S. Air Force and for being a part of our
Congratulations.
Thank you so much, sir. It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for the privilege of being here and the opportunity to see government at work. I think it's exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations again. Now if we could have our Fire Chief, Mike Multivern, come up. And while Mike is on his way up, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege and recognize another veteran in the audience. And my father, John Quaker, is here from Boyden, Iowa. Thank you, Dad. And my dad was a sentry dog handler in Vietnam and was stationed in Okinawa for a time. So thank you for your service to our country and to me. So thank you for coming. All right. I want to recognize our Fire Chief, Mike Multivern. You know, sometimes I think people have a perception of government employees that they, work 9 to 2:30 and then go fishing. But I will say that we have a very dedicated staff here in Rapid City, and someone that I've really come to respect for his dedication and leadership in the fire department is Mike Multivern, our fire chief. And again, this morning, he texted me real early in the morning. Hopefully you weren't driving. No, sir. But he informed me of a situation in our community, and he does a great job of keeping our council and department heads and the mayor's office informed of what's happening, and he's a good leader. He's respected by his team, and he has recently earned the position or the title of Executive Fire Officer. And I'm going to just take a moment and read this. This is from the United States Fire Administration, from the National Fire Academy. In recognition of successful completion of the requisite courses of study and applied research projects, the National Fire Academy, under the authority granted by the 111th Congress of the United States, and on recommendation of the faculty, confers the title of Executive Fire Officer upon Mike J. Multivern with all the honors, privileges, and responsibilities appertaining. Congratulations, we're very proud of you.
Not a normal certificate. This was about a 4-year project. I had to get state sponsorship as well as city sponsorship to attend this program. It's a 4-year master's level program, again, run through the U.S. Fire Administration and FEMA as well as Department of Homeland Security. And you go back to the Fire Academy for 2 weeks, you come back, you complete a 6-month applied research project, and you have to get 3.0 to be published, and then you do that 4 years consecutively. So my understanding, there's only between 3,000 and 4,000 fire chiefs that have ever completed this program in over 20 years of existence. So believe me, this is a big deal to receive on behalf of the city and also the state and the federal government. But this isn't about me. This is about the city giving me opportunities to grow personally and professionally as a leader of the fire department. And when I look at that, I think, you know, what that does, not just for me, but my ability to then lead the fire department and do the best job I can and the department can for the city. And so this is an honor for me, but certainly I believe it's an honor for the fire department to have a member with this esteemed title. And we have right now currently 2 other members of the fire department that are enrolled in this program. And it's one of those things, once you get your name in the organization and they see the work that you're doing in your community, then it's easier to get future employees. So again, the city has given me great opportunities to grow professionally, and this is certainly something that I'll cherish. So thank you for allowing me to attend.
Congratulations. We now have an executive session to discuss personnel matters relating to the STCL 1-25-2 and 1-25-2 subsection 3. And I believe the item to be discussed is item number 3, which is direction to staff regarding open position within the Community Resources Department. It should say resources, not services. We have a motion. We have a motion by Nordstrom and a second by Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We have a motion to come out of executive session. Motion by Nordstrom, second by Peterson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item on the agenda is direction to staff. This is item number 3 regarding open position with the Community Resources Department. And the action coming out of executive session is a recommendation to authorize staff to offer position to Human Resources Manager candidate at grade 22, step H. Grade 22, step H.
Second.
We have a motion by Estes and a second by Wright. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Do not see any general public comment items, so we'll move on to item number 4, which is the 211 Community Trends Report for 2013. And we'll recognize Heidi Belgies. Good evening, Heidi.
How are you?
Good.
My name is Heidi Belgiesi. I'm with Helpline Center. We're a United Way agency, and we operate the 211 information line, which is a free 24-hour service. We can answer questions and provide referrals to social service agencies, nonprofit organizations, and government offices. Each year, we put out what we call our Community Trends Report, which is basically a summary of the previous year's calls that were received on 211 from the 6 Black Hills counties. I do have some more copies up here if anyone's interested in them, but I just wanted to kind of hit the highlights of it a little bit for you guys. I think it's good information for you to have, and also we've appreciated the support we've gotten from the city in the past and just want to keep you updated. So if you look in the center panel there, it shows that our calls were up quite a bit last year. We had 9,706 calls. The vast majority of those, more than 8,000, were from the Rapid City area. And the reason for the increase was Winter Storm Atlas. We answered close to 2,000 storm-related calls in the weeks after the blizzard. Our callers last year ranged in age from 10 to 97. I know we had some 10-year-olds call looking for food for their families, so it's a real wide range of calls. More than half of the calls we get are information calls. Those are calls where the person knows what they need. Maybe they're looking for the summer hours for the boys club. They're just looking for an answer. Referral calls make up about 38% of our calls, and those are calls from people who know they need some help but they don't know where to go. Maybe they're looking for a substance abuse program for a teenager, or there's again a wide variety of things that can fall into that category. Every call that comes into 211 is answered by a live person. And all the calls are documented and categorized. And the basic needs category includes all the calls about things like housing, food, transportation. And those typically make up the bulk of the calls that come into 211. Last year was a little bit different because of the storm. We actually had more disaster-related calls, but our basic needs calls were also up. Another thing that this report helps us do is identify what we call unmet needs, where there might be gaps in services in the community. Last year, housing was at the top of that list. We have a lot of calls from people who are looking for help with rent deposits and rent payments, and there aren't a lot of programs to help with those things. Transportation was the second unmet need, and one thing that I've found kind of interesting here, I know we've been getting more calls from people who are on their way to the oil fields in North Dakota, and they've made it this far and run out of money, and they're looking for gas money to get the rest of the way. People can also go to our website, which is helplinescenter.org, and search our database. You can search by community to find the services that you're looking for. We had more than 11,000 individual searches of the database last year, so people are getting answers that way as well. Our call center also answers the suicide crisis line for the entire state of South Dakota. Last year we had 146 suicide-related calls from the Black Hills. The back page of this is kind of a summary of the winter storm response. As I said, we had more than 1,900 phone calls that were storm-related. Everything from people looking for emergency shelter to elderly folks with trees down, ranchers with missing cattle, and also we had a lot of calls from volunteers, people wanting to volunteer or to donate to the relief efforts. And 211 was able to serve as kind of a clearinghouse for a lot of that information, so that we could eventually get the volunteers hooked up with the people that needed help and those types of things. So I talked fast because I know I had 3 minutes, but I appreciate your time, and if anyone wants to contact me later to talk more about any of this or has questions, I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you very much, Heidi.
Thanks.
We will now open the public comment for items 5 through 60. Public comment is now open on items 5 through 60. And we have one speaker request form on those items, and we'll first go to Vicki Fuss on item number 55. And item number 55 is, while Vicki's coming up, item 55 is to approve the Historic Preservation Commission's denial of siding and door replacements at 1107 Kansas City and 703 11th. The floor is yours. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Vicki Fuss, and please bear with me. This is not my forte. I recently purchased 2 fourplexes, 1-bedroom apartments. Unknowingly, it was in the National Register of Historic Places, and I'm pleading that the City Council objectively review the upgrades that I propose for the 2 building, providing the preservation and beautification of these structures. These are low-income housing catering to war veterans with Pennington Housing and local downtown employees. I had budgeted when I purchased these properties to have this work done based on these properties. These are the exact same structures built by the exact same contractor in approximately the same time. This is vinyl siding that, according to the owner, was put on 20 years ago with fiberglass doors. I'm a small-time investor, and I'm completely unaware of the commercial properties were part of the historic district, nor of the restrictions that applied, and this costs me a great deal of time as well as financial loss. I'm now with a half-finished building and remaining materials in the backyard, and I'm being asked to tear them down and start all over. Pardon me, I'm shaking. Oops. This is the building on Kansas City Street, and the listed contributing factors was the symmetrical fenestration, which is the shape of the windows, the pedimented entry, which is the overhang of the door, the multi-lighted wood door, and the opposing chimneys of the side gables. None of these structures are going to be changed. All I'm wanting to do is to wrap them and preserve them with the vinyl siding and the wrap of the windows. The door, if I were to, there's a door on one property, but there is not a door on the other properties. And, excuse me, that is a oops, that's not mine. Anyway, there is not a door on the Kansas City, it is a solid wood door on the Kansas City apartment. And so in order to have the same door, I need to purchase new doors. If I'm to purchase a wood door, it would be $1,750. If I could get a fiberglass door, they're approximately $500. Let me, whoops. Try to go to something here. Okay. Oh, I've lost most of my pictures. My apologies. With the fact being known that there isn't anything majorly being changed, all the structures stay the same, the side gables, which was the one picture that just showed up, the buildings were listed by RTA, which is a paid survey done in approximately 92, as apartment structures, not as a house. And this survey defined both buildings as definitely not contributory. Now then, this survey was then brought to state and then brought nationally, and then nationally decided to leave it in place where it was and not to change anything. So there is some question as far as what, just really how contributory are they? And with the listed facts of what is contributory,
Vicki, if we could, we have some other, we have another public comment on another item as well. So what we'll do is I'm sure that one of the council members will probably pull this item for separate consideration. And if they have any questions, then you'll have an opportunity to answer those questions and hopefully get the rest of your points across at that time.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. We have, we'll go back 2 items to item number 54. We have a special guest tonight. We have President Brian Brewer from the Ogallala Sioux Tribe. Good evening, Mr. President. Thank you for coming down. And President Brewer would like to speak on item number 54, and I'll just read this into the record. This is to request our City Council to approve a resolution of support to amend the title on some Rapid City Indian Board school lands from general federal trust land to tribal trust land. And sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to say it's my honor to be here, to be before the council. You know, I've been before the council before. As you know, I'm the director of the Lakota Nation Invitational, and we've been up here for almost 40 years now. And you know, we had some real tough beginnings, but I've been working on reconciliation for all these years, and I really believe that it's starting to pay off. You know, the relationship with the Indian communities in Rapid City has really changed, and I really appreciate that. You know, one of the things as the president of the Ogallala Sioux Tribe, I represent my people on reservation, but I also represent the Ogallalas who live here in Rapid City, and there's about 15,000 of them that live here. And we do have concerns, and we worry about our children up here, the high dropout rate and everything. And Mayor, this is kind of off the subject, but you know, we talked about maybe me coming up here and having a meeting. And so we are concerned about our Lakotas that live here. I am here this evening. I'm representing 16 tribes from 3 different states. You know, the old boarding school, Rapid City Boarding School, you know, it was a boarding school. It was a sanatorium for our people that had tuberculosis, and also now it's the Susan Hospital run by the IHS. We had so many of our people died up here. We had a little ceremony at the grave site where some of the graves are a couple of weeks ago. And these are all unmarked graves. At that time, the Army felt that it would cost too much money to mark the graves. So none of the graves are marked. But we can see where they were. We had our people come up here and we looked at that. We're asking that this land be put back into trust. There's different things that we can do. We'd really like to have a memorial there in our own Lakota way to honor them. You know, we have children buried up there that were taken from their homes. And never got to go home. They came to Rapid City and never got to go home. But, you know, they are buried in the Black Hills. You know, and this is we consider the Black Hills our home. So they are in a good place, but we want to do it right. We'd like to do some educational things with the land also. It's so beautiful up here, and it's good to bring our children to the Black Hills. So this is what I'm asking, Mayor. We're really looking for your support to get this land turned from federal trust to tribal trust, and but I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to me tonight. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. When we get to that particular item, if it's pulled from consent, then there'll be an opportunity for council members to ask you questions.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yes.
We do not have any further speaker request forms on items 5 through 60. Public comment is now closed. And if council members would like to pull any lights for separate, or any items for separate consideration, please hit your lights. We will pull, for starters, items 54, 55, and 56. 54, 55, and 56. We'll go to Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to pull items number 33, 34, and 35.
33, 34,
Oh,
and
and
35.
sorry, 49.
And 49. So I'll read this one more time. 33, 34, 35, 49, 54, 55, and 56. Do we have a motion to approve the balance? Motion by Peterson, second by Estes, to approve items 5 through 60 with the exception of 33, 34, 35, 49, and 54 through 56. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We will go to item number 33, and we will recognize our Public Works Chairman, Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 33 is to acknowledge the Stormwater Utility 5-year capital improvement plan, and I move to acknowledge.
Motion by Nordstrom, second by Pearson. We'll go to Alderwoman Amanda Scott. Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask Mr. Wolstershaw some clarifying questions on this, please?
You may.
Thank you. Terry, as we were talking during Public Works, this is a CIP plan or a construction plan that utilizes the funds that'll be generated in 2015 that'll be collected as a separate enterprise fund, correct?
That is correct.
Thank you. And then also from Public Works, there was an item from almost a month now back, for I think it's a drainage retention pond, if I remember correctly, that's south of the city.
Yes, Metering Pond 203, which is part of the Lazy P6 development off of Catron Boulevard.
Thank you. I knew you'd remember which one it was. This, the fee that is going to be paid to create the revenue for the drainage utility is only applied to properties located within the city limits. So you had brought up before that you weren't sure if you were comfortable utilizing money that the rest of the properties that are paying within the incorporated limits of the city to be used for a project outside the city. And so since this one, let me ask this, is that the only project on the 5-year plan that actually lies outside the city limits?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and do you want to reaffirm your opinion, or have you given it any more thought?
No, my opinion still stands. We did place it on the 5-year plan. I believe that ultimately this property will be annexed, and the area that contributes drainage to it will be annexed into the city. I would hope that would happen sometime here in calendar year 2014. So I felt it was prudent to place it on the plan. And you keep in mind, before we move forward with any of these projects, those will come back through the City Council for advertising authority, just like all of our CIP projects do. So it probably won't be the last time we have a discussion on it.
All right. And just for clarification purposes, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. There is already an annexation agreement in place, and that's where you're getting your reference that this property, you're anticipating this property to be annexed at one point or another because there is an agreement in place.
Technically, there's not an annexation agreement. There's an oversize agreement for the utilities and the street improvements that are going to go in place. So technically it's an oversize agreement, not an annexation agreement. But in having multiple conversations with the developer and their engineer over the past, they, I think, intend eventually to annex it. And we also have an item later on the agenda that talks about forcibly annexing it.
Okay. Well, so there's only the one property. All the other projects that are on this 5-year plan lie within the incorporated city limits.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you, Terry. I yield the floor.
We'll now go to Alderman Jerry Wright. Jerry.
I believe that part of the structure that's being talked about, NP 203, that a portion of that lies upon landfill property, does it not? And I believe that portion is in the city.
Correct. A portion of the structure is.
Just want to leave that
in the
correct,
city,
so
yeah.
the discussion is there is a portion of this facility that's in the city, and it's on city property. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? The motion is for approval of item number 33. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Good discussion. 34, Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 34 is to approve request to purchase replacement pickup for solid waste collections from McKee Ford in the amount of $22,906, matching the state bid contract. And I move to approve.
Motion by Nordstrom and a second by Laurenti. Is there any objection from anyone, including the person who pulled this from the agenda, to include 34 and 35 in this motion? Is your question the same on both? Okay, so item 34 and 35, and it's okay with the motion maker and the seconder to include 34 and 35 in the same motion for approval. Both are trucks from the same place. Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask Mr. Wolsterstorff a question on these two items, please?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Terry, on the Public Works meeting last week, when these two items were addressed, I also posed a question because the way they're written in the documentation as provided, it makes it appear as if we're trying to increase the number of vehicles within the city's fleet. And you had indicated that these vehicles are actually doing a domino effect so that there are actually two vehicles that will be disposed of, so the fleet is not being increased in order to have extra city employees driving around the streets and using gas and using M&R cost. And because as vehicles get older, they do cost more in order to keep in service. So I had made a request, and you had said that you would attach some documentation, and you didn't. So did your opinion change, or did you find out some information that changed, or can you identify the two vehicles that will be disposed of, and when will the council see those two pieces of equipment up for disposal?
That's a good question, and I apologize, I did not attach any additional documentation. What typically happens out at the landfill, especially at the landfills, that there's kind of a domino effect where the trucks tend to move to further down the chain of command, so to speak, eventually to where you have a vehicle used for litter control to where it doesn't even leave the site anymore. So, and that's typically what will happen with these. The supervisor truck, which will be handed down to the can man or can person truck, and then that vehicle will be used for the litter control, operators that are operating out there. So eventually you get to a point where we're ready to surplus one to the point where it really hardly even runs anymore out there. So as far as when that will come forward, I don't have an exact date, but that will be coming forward at a later date.
60 days, this year, 5 years?
I would expect this year.
This year. So you do plan on disposing. I'm just trying to get clarification to make sure that we're not increasing the fleet. Because like I said, older vehicles take more cost as far as labor as well as parts to keep them going. And believe me, I work in an organization where everybody likes to hide equipment because you can get one more ride out of it, or you can get one more trip out of it. But studies have showed in my company, you end up paying through the nose in order to keep vehicles running.
I agree with that comment, especially with the prices we get on state bids. You can see for the prices we're paying for new vehicles here, they're extremely reasonable. I mean, so it may look like we're driving new vehicles, but keep in mind under the state bid contracts, or in this case where local dealerships matching the state bid, we can get very reasonable prices and drive vehicles that are under warranty. So I would agree with that comment.
When the two vehicles come for disposal before City Council, will the recommendation be made to use as trade-ins, or do you plan on?
No, by the time we get done with them at the landfill, there's not a lot of use left in them.
So they'll be for disposal? Scrap?
We'll surplus them. Somebody will probably pick them up. But at that point, there's not a lot of value left in them.
All right. Thank you, Terry. I can feel more comfortable agreeing to this, knowing that those two other vehicles will be removed from service. Thank you. Yield the floor, Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman Jerry Wright. Okay. No further discussion on items 34 and 35. Motion is for approval. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're now on item number 49. And we'll go to our distinguished Legal and Finance Chairman, Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Item number 49 is authorized Winter Storm Atlas equipment purchases. I move approval.
We have a motion by Lewis and a second by Laurenti. We'll go to Amanda Scott. Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to offer a substitute motion to continue this item for 2 weeks. And if I can have a second, I'll explain why.
Motion by Scott and a second by Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. This item came before Legal and Finance with no documentation attached, so technically it was only attached after the Wednesday meeting. I'm not even sure it was on Wednesday. It might have been on Thursday that it was attached. And in looking at it, it looks like the equipment listed, which is about $663,000. The proposal is to come out of general funds, when originally this equipment was noted as it needed for emergencies, when it was thought that the emergency money provided for Storm Atlas was going to be able to be utilized for this equipment. I'd like a little bit more time personally to review this and ask some questions regarding this equipment, because if we're seriously going to fund this equipment, I would hate to see this equipment be put into daily operations so that, again, we have old, used up equipment the next time we have a storm come around. So I'm asking the council to support in order to continue this for 2 weeks, just so that we can have more time to look into it. Thank you.
We'll go to Alderman Jerry Wright.
Apologize not for being on top of this as I wished I would have, but I know in sitting through the operations last year during the Desert Storm, it's another story, Atlas, that we found ourselves stretched beyond limits with our existing equipment and shortage of specialized equipment to meet the needs of the disaster. And there's a great deal of discussion of getting equipment on hand available for quick response and within our hands so we could respond. Most people don't realize it, and I think most on the council were briefed, that in the fire department and police department, and Dustin Willett did a great job of briefing us. We had extreme limitations based on our equipment we had, and this is an intent to get equipment that we can address this emergency. We may not need it for 10 years, we might need it again this year. I support it. A 2-week delay to answer questions is not a problem. I think it's a good investment and it needs to be done. Thank you.
Alderman Richie Nordstrom. Richie?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a general question. Are we running up any deadlines on any of this equipment purchases, running into any deadlines? And if I may direct that to Chief Multiver to start with.
Chief Mike Multiver.
Why, thank you. If I could just ask for a little attitude, I'd like to speak a little bit to the equipment that's certainly privy to the fire department and police department.
It's fine with me.
And maybe even, if it's okay with Jeff, I'd like to speak to some of the equipment on Parks and Rec's list as well. But there is a need today for a pretty good share of this equipment to still deal with damage in our community sustained from the winter storm. We have large pockets of forested areas that still have a considerable amount of dead and down material now from the storm. The city does not have the equipment in our fleet, either Parks and Rec or the fire department, to go out and mechanically remove that, whether that be mechanically thin, chip it, remove it, anything. And I'll speak for a couple of other departments. We're fielding calls throughout the community now that the city owns property that needs to be cleaned up, and the citizens are, whether it be county residents, city residents, are being encouraged to go out and continue to clean up storm damage. A number of those residents are then coming back to either the fire department or Parks and Rec saying, well, I'm being encouraged to clean mine up. Why isn't the city cleaning their lot up over there? And we really don't have the equipment to do that. We did have a contract after the storm that obviously was here for 3 rounds throughout the city, took care of a lot of it, but the city projects are still out there. And this is not just from Winter Storm Atlas. This is an ongoing thing that there's plenty of work in our forested areas in the community. We've got our Survivable Space Initiative that we do with Parks and Rec, that we could utilize this equipment to continue to treat government property throughout the city. In addition to that, just in the list for police and fire, we're asking for some money to stand up what I would call an incident management team. Rapid City and Pennington County does not have an organized team that we can call upon to come in collectively and organize an incident or manage an incident like the winter storm. We have the people and the talent. It's just that we're not formally set up. For giving an example, every county in Colorado has one of these Type 3 incident management teams. So no matter what the type of emergency, they already have this cadre of personnel, and it covers every aspect of a disaster in terms of operations, finance, logistics, planning. All those people are pre-identified. They're on a paging system. They bring them into an incident command post, and they manage an incident. We do it, but we do it not as efficiently and effectively as we probably could. That was one of the things that was identified in Winter Storm Atlas that we needed. It was called out in after-action reviews as all the players sat down and reviewed our response to the incident. That is also in here that would be funded. There's things like radios and clipboards and better mapping, some GIS projects, plotters to print large-scale maps. So we're standing out in the field, we can print maps and look at the city and use GIS and rapid map and all that and make better sound decisions in the field. So there is some snow removal equipment and some things that are specific to operating vehicles in deep snow, but that's only a smaller percentage of that total. So there are needs right now that we could put this equipment to use for. One of the pieces, to answer Richie's question, is that there is an expensive piece of equipment that we are hoping to get purchased in Colorado. It's literally the only piece of equipment like it's with the abilities it has in the United States right now. They're a war hand-me-down from like Scandinavia or someplace. There's two in the country right now. One of them is in Littleton, Colorado, and the guy's holding it for us. And so, yeah, we would love to get this approved and get that thing purchased. It's got rubber tracks instead of metal tracks. You can go on hard surface, soft surface. We can haul 16 or 17 people in there. Be good for gathering up police and firefighters, getting them into the stations, doing a sweep on our interstates or some of the areas in the community that drift real bad to evacuate people from stranded vehicles and all that. So there is a sense of urgency, and we've been diligently going through this list, combing through it, whittling away at it. This list was probably 3 times as big when we started, and we really think that this list is important for the city and our abilities to respond to a storm and prepare for the next one. Thank you.
You're welcome. And if I can just ask another question of my colleague, Alderwoman Scott, would it be all right with you if we went ahead with the non-tracked equipment, meaning that if there is any equipment that would delay those pieces of equipment for 2 weeks, but the rest of them would that be all right with you to get them on order now?
You may answer the question if you so choose.
Mayor, in order to answer that question, I would have to address a question to Chief Multiver.
Richie, do you yield the floor?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, are you saying that 2 weeks is paramount and that you're in an emergency situation where you cannot afford to wait 2 weeks?
Mike.
Thank you. If I call the guy back in Colorado and he has other communities, this year was, I would say, unprecedented in our region for snow and the length of the winter, and they sold a lot of these pieces of equipment throughout our region, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, places like that. If we don't get this one in Colorado, we would likely have to, the next closest is in Canada, which I can't imagine what it would cost to ship that thing from Canada and how we would possibly purchase a piece of equipment like that on an international basis.
So, Chief, I'm going to re-ask you the question. Are you saying that 2 weeks, I mean, this is critical. You're going to lose this piece of equipment if we don't approve it tonight for 2 weeks?
Amanda, I'm not selling it, so I can't attest to that.
How long have you been looking at this? I mean, did you just look at it 2 weeks ago?
Sure. We have been dealing with it. We sent 2 firefighters down to Colorado when there was still snow in the mountains. They trained on this vehicle for 3 days. They came back with the recommendation that this is the piece of equipment to buy. We have been in communication with the owner of the equipment, a vendor, for probably 4 to 6 weeks, trying to keep him to hold it. And we're telling him that it's on an agenda. I think it's going to be approved. I think we can come down and buy it. And so he's holding it. So I don't know. I'm not selling it. I don't know.
In my opinion, you'd have an additional 2 weeks, and I would have to wait and vote no if this is going to go tonight because I'm not comfortable with it. So if we have 2 weeks, I think I'll probably be much more comfortable once I can ask some questions. Like I said, the attachments for this item for $663,000 coming out of general fund right off the bottom line, which will require a supplemental appropriation to add to the 2014 budget. I'm not comfortable being presented 72 hours and say, give us the money. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Bonnie Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I supported Ms. Scott on this since it was just brought forward to us, but I'll leave it to a colleague to make a motion if we want to split it out. I have questions for some of the department heads.
Go ahead.
That's okay. Chief, this tracked equipment, that's that 185, that's what you're saying needs to, that you have the Littleton, Colorado location on, right? 185,000. Is that piece of equipment?
We have the tracked troop carrier, the BV-206 is out of Colorado. And then prices for removable tracks for 2 ATVs, 2 SUVs or side-by-sides, and for our John Deere Gators, we went through an informal bid process here in Rapid City, and that we selected the lower prices we got on those equipment. I don't know how long they'll honor those prices. They're at least a month out, but this time of the year, I'm sure they're not selling a lot of that, and there's probably other places we could go get that equipment. But the two items that I'd be interested in is the tracked troop carrier, and then
And that's your tracked equipment at 185,000.
Only 95 of that 185.5.
Go ahead.
I guess I don't see it. How much is it?
$95,000 for the tracked troop carrier.
Okay. And then what other piece?
The other items, I wouldn't have any problem waiting 2 weeks for.
Okay, so it's the one for the 95,000 then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask Terry Welchersdorf a question, please.
You may.
Okay. Terry, I don't know if the fire chief was speaking for you on that, or is there anything urgent that you need to get on your list?
My one piece of equipment can wait.
Okay. And then, Jeff, if you're kind of shaking your head, yes, you can wait, or? Okay. I guess what I'd like to see my colleagues do is to pull out this $95,000 one and approve it, and then give us time to look at the other properties and learn more about how we're going to come up with another $500,000 future. So thank you.
We'll go to our Fire Chief, Mike Maltaverne.
Actually, with the latitude I had earlier, I addressed the comments. I had one piece of information, though, in reference to the tracks that we're going to get for the UTV, or excuse me, the side-by-sides and the ATVs and the John Deere Gators. What we did is we looked at our existing inventory of specialized vehicles and looked at the most cost-effective way to make those vehicles capable to travel in deep snow. So instead of going out and buying snowmobiles and things like that that literally may sit around and only be used a couple of times in 10 years, these 3 particular pieces of equipment would allow us to, in the summer months, use them for rescues and all the other functions we have, standbys and everything else, and then you store the tracks, and then come winter season, you track them up and they're ready to go. So we did try to look at our existing inventory and make the best utilization of equipment we already have in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to remind everyone, the motion on the floor currently, it's the original motion, and that's to continue this item back to Legal and Finance, right? And then come back, or continue 2 weeks. Okay. Steve Laurenti, Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a substitute motion to split the current agenda item, that we approve the tracked vehicle, the $95,000 tracked vehicle, and delay the remainder for 2 weeks so that council can take a look at the items as necessary and have all the questions answered prior to the approval for the rest of the equipment.
Okay, we have a motion by Laurenti and a second by Peterson. And if I can interpret your motion or restate it, it's to approve the track vehicle for $95,000 and to continue the rest to the next legal and finance meeting.
That's correct, and I'd like to maintain
Fair?
the floor.
Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. If I can, I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Woltersdorf and possibly the chief as well, if he can chime in on this particular question, but if I could do that.
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Woltersdorf, on the, my support of this centered really around a lot of the fact that, from the storm, we spent a lot of money on contracting for a lot of the services to do a lot of the cleanup. Can you speak to some of this equipment? Is it going to help us with those types of situations in the future where we're not having to contract out emergency contracts, which were very expensive, as we all remember? We approved those. Can you speak to that? And then, Chief, if you can speak to that as well, it may not apply for you, but if you would, please. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Well, obviously, it's going to depend on the type of disaster we have. If it was another similar to event to the October blizzard, I would still anticipate we would be contracting out some of that work, simply because even with the equipment we're purchasing here, in a lot of cases, it's not the special equipment that we needed to contract to come in. We had multiple we had a contract that brought in multiple subcontractors with boom trucks for tree trimming activities. We had multiple contracts with tree grinding activities, hauling, that type of thing. So in the event of a disaster, probably any type of disaster, you're still going to have some contracting work that's going to happen. On the list that's in front of you tonight, the only public works equipment that's on here is a V plow. It's a 6x6, so it's a large 6-wheel drive V snow plow. Keep in mind, during the snow event, we actually were grounded at one point where we couldn't even get the snow moved. And this larger vehicle would at least give us an option for getting some of those emergency vehicles out. The remainder of the stuff, other than what Chief Maltavern mentions, our Parks Department and Jeff Beegler would probably have to speak to that.
Okay. Chief, I don't know if you had anything or not, but maybe Mr. Beegler would like to go. So.
Thank you. I think that the items that are listed under the parks here are items that we would use immediately after a snow event, before contractors are brought in to do some of the larger or the heavier lifting. As the chief alluded to earlier, these are all items that could be used tomorrow to deal with the debris that's still left over from the last storm. So these are storm items that could be used now, that could be used in the next event. Just not a matter of if, but when. And these items would certainly allow us a lot more flexibility to get in and to get things cut up and removed in a hurry, both to support emergency services and to try and clear roads for residents and such to get out and about.
So, Mr. Beegler, let me follow-up question with you then on that. If we don't purchase this equipment, how do you handle the things that need to be done that you're hoping with this equipment?
We have very limited equipment right now. We do have a very old chipper, one chipper that's being used for all, not just emergency work, but just for general tree work. We would certainly not be able to respond in a timely manner or even at all if the equipment that we do have is not available to us.
Thank you.
Alderman Jerry Wright. Jerry?
I think we have a couple things going on here, and I think we need to sort them out. We're dealing primarily with equipment needed for life safety, life support, quick response, early response, not recovery, correct? Okay, thank you. The other part of it is funding. How much of this is eligible under the FEMA grant, or is it? Zero? Okay, so it's all of ours. The other questions I have then are related to the purchasing of this equipment. If we're going to buy anything over, what, $25,000, we need permission to advertise and formal bid letting type things, unless we declare it an emergency or unless we are willing to accept sole source bidding, is that correct? So most of these items, except for this track vehicle, are in line for formal bid process or informal bid process through our department, so we're going to see it again anyway. The big issue probably is funding, giving them $663,000 to do it. And if the issue is the track vehicle, and it's that critical we lock it down, then in my opinion, and finance and council can correct me, appears to me maybe we need an emergency purchase order or something like that? No? Sole source, excuse me, thank you. So there's a couple of facets here we need to sort out. So it'd be sole source for that. The rest of it would come through normal bid or informal bid processing, which our directors would handle, and come to us appropriately. The big issue before us is funding. Are we willing to give $663,000, and where's it going to come from? Undesignated cash or council contingency?
You don't have that much in council contingency.
Keep spending it, don't we?
About $140,000 probably in council contingency.
Well, that's right, I'm sorry. I was dreaming.
Anything else?
Anyway, those are the issues. No, I think we have bidding issues and funding issues. And I support buying it. I just need to get all that sorted out.
We'll go to Chad Lewis.
And this is not the place to do it.
Kick me out of the queue there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't remember what I was going to say now. We've talked so much, but actually I do appreciate the chief's position on the Swedish Högland is what they're referring to as the vehicle he's talking about. I've actually had the pleasure of riding in one all over Antarctica back in the day when I was actually interesting to talk to. And they're a very useful tool. They're actually fully amphibious as well, so they're not limited to just rolling around in the snow. They're actually they're very practical for search and rescue. That's what they use down in Antarctica and places like that. That they're very, you can use them for anything, and so it's not just it's going to be sitting around all day long. Can't be used for anything else. I think it's something that we could definitely be a great addition to our fleet. And as far as the rest of the stuff goes, I'm not in the business of emergency management, so I'm not going to try to micromanage you guys' jobs. I do appreciate the fact that we have to find the funding for it, but hopefully we can do that and get it taken care of. And I do appreciate giving Ms. Scott another 2 weeks to study this, because I know that's something that's important to her. So I appreciate the substitute motion for my colleague, and let's go on.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of questions for the chief. During Storm Atlas, Mike, at what point, what was the most amount of people we had stranded in vehicles in Rapid City?
Hundreds.
And some of these people I know because I was in contact with one on the phone for 24 hours, was in their car for 24 hours. And some of the conversations we had during that time, one of the reasons why these people were not getting out was because we did not have the equipment to get them out. And I have to applaud you for finding this piece of equipment, because in our conversations, one of the reasons we couldn't get these people out was because we couldn't transport enough of them at one time. So I think you've done a wonderful job. I think this is something the city needs, and I think it's a good investment. So thank you, Mike.
Brad Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make it quick. I'm going to support this. I think we need to get this, for life safety reasons, we need to get this $95,000 tracked vehicle bought. I recall talking to Chief Moldover the night of the blizzard, and he said, Brad, we've got every ambulance, every fire truck we own is stuck. And if something happened, I mean, we have no ability to move people with tracked vehicles. So I think we can use undesignated cash and get that rig bought. I think 2 weeks is a good idea to review the rest of this stuff. So I'm going to support the motion. Thanks.
Mike Multevern.
Just one, and I know we've already talked about the storm itself, but one of the things that's interesting about the V-plow, the reason this piece of equipment shows up on this list is there was a time frame of about 10 hours where we were completely paralyzed, meaning people were calling 911 and there were calls going unanswered. We had, Mayor, we had a vehicle that burned up on your street, couldn't get to. We had a couple of house fires. We had a woman that had a sick baby we couldn't get to. There was an imminent pregnancy in a vehicle we couldn't get to, and all that. And you've heard all the stories, but interesting thing about this V-plow is we had to sector the city into 4 quadrants and find some way to manage the calls for service and try to figure out how we're going to get police and fire out to these calls for service. And excuse me, we did not have the equipment in the city's fleet to effectively get our resources into the field. So what we did is we again, came up with quadrants for the community. We used Omaha, which is basically Highway 44, east and west, and we used 5th Street and North Haines, north and south. And the way we did that was we would get our crews to one of those streets, get them up, and then literally they'd have to go in by foot. We've got stories from both agencies where our crew members literally walked hundreds of yards to make a rescue or check on somebody or deliver oxygen bottles. We went out on Facebook and basically solicited from the community anybody who would be willing to volunteer with a snowmobile. And we brought in snowmobiles from all over the community to deliver oxygen bottles, which put us at a tremendous amount of liability and risk if we didn't have an opportunity to check those people out. What if they'd have got hurt or whatever? Back to the V-plow. We had no way to even quadrant or come up with those quadrants for the city. We had no vehicle in the city's fleet to plow 5th Street north and south or Omaha east and west. We had to rely on, I believe, the state to come in with their V-plow and provide that service. And as soon as we had one lane open, then we could get north and south and east and west. So that thing right there would have really, really been nice that night. So thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone understands the motion? The motion is to approve the track vehicle for $95,000 funding sources, general fund unencumbered cash, and delay the remaining items to the next week's or to the next legal and finance meeting. All clear? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for the good discussion. Item number 54, and we'll go to Chad Lewis, 54.
Item number 54 is a request of City Council to approve resolutions of support to amend the title on some Rapid City Indian Board school lands from general federal trust land to tribal trust land. I move approval.
By Lewis, second by Roberts. Any discussion? We'll go to Bonnie Peterson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that it's going to be an honor to do this resolution of support. It's a very good cause, and it's a great opportunity for the city to work with the tribal governments to betterment of all. So thank you.
Thank you. And before we proceed to the vote, I just want to take a moment to say thank you to Heather Thompson. I know you're modest and humble, but we want to let you know how much we appreciate your leadership on this issue. You have brought an issue to our community's attention that many of us, including myself, had no idea that there was an issue. And so I want to thank you for your hard work on this. You've given multiple presentations, and the position that you serve as a member of the Parks and Recreation Board pays an awful lot, and we'll give you a raise as a result. So thank you very much. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are now on item number 55.
Thank you, Your Honorable Sam Quaker. Number 55 is approve historic preservation's denial of siding and door replacement at 1107 Kansas City Street and 703 11th Street. I move approval.
Clarification of your motion.
Of the denial.
The motion is to affirm or approve the denial.
Correct.
Affirm the denial. We have a second to that motion. Second. A second by Nordstrom. Do we have discussion? Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify or ask a couple of questions, probably in general to the staff. If we go along with this proposal that was recommended by the Historic Preservation Group, is that they are eligible for other funding sources, grants, for example, or maybe even looking at some other funding source so that they could go to those sources and not just simply rely upon their bank or their own pocketbook.
When you say they, are you referring to the applicants or
the applicants,
or the
yes.
commissioners?
The owner of 1107 and 703.
All right. Who would you like to direct your question to? Vicki Fisher? Or?
If I may, start with Vicki, yes.
We'll go to Vicki Fisher. Good evening, Vicki.
Thank you, Mayor. Very good question. We've not been posed that question before that I'm aware of. I'm not quite sure if they're required to meet those standards set forth by the Historic Preservation Committee and supported by Council. Typically, that's back on the property owner to then do so. If there's any lack of funding then to make that commitment, There may be something through community development, I'm not sure, but typically that goes to the property owner to do.
What I like about this whole process is that they're housing, or actually doing affordable housing out of this project. So that's the part I support very strongly. And if we can find some other, not we, but if they are eligible to find other funding sources to go forward with that, and if we can give them some additional ideas for other funding sources, if we can do that. Is that permissible?
Mr. Mayor? We do have Barb in the audience today, too. So if you would allow staff to maybe have a discussion outside of this meeting and look at what other options might be, and we can certainly get in touch with the property owner and share those ideas. But sitting here tonight, we can't make any guarantees that there would be funding available.
Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
We'll go to Alderman Brad Estes. Brad.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the alderman who sits on historic preservation, this has been a tough situation. You know, we had Pierre come in and give a little seminar or whatever, and I thought that was going to clear everything up. And to me, it sometimes makes things even worse. But one of the things, you know, first I want to say I think it's pretty clear in my eyes that vinyl siding isn't supposed to be used within the historic district. That's my opinion. You know, and I'm not real clear on some of the other rules. You know, the way we enforce, way some things in my mind are done on historic preservation. I think we try to enforce rules that are in place if you want to do tax credits. If you don't want tax credits, I think different rules apply. But I think we got a situation that's somewhat broke that needs to be fixed in some of the planning. But I guess to try to put a point on the spear here, what I've asked historic preservation to do is I think we need to draw a line in the sand here, because a year or two ago, or within the last year, that district, it's the only part in town where you have to get a permit to put siding on. You can put siding and windows in a home anywhere in Rapid City without a permit, but not in the historic preservation, the area of historic preservation. But so what I've asked is for them to try to come up with money, because I think everybody needs to be notified via certified mail that their home, you know, they own property within the district, and certain rules apply, and one of them is the fact that you do have to get a permit. I don't know if these, you know, we can second guess whether they knew or didn't know. They claim they didn't know, but it's a little bit of a tough deal because they've started and you know, you know, they didn't apply for the permit. So it's a tough situation, but I do think that we have the burden to put everybody on notice that in that district that different rules apply and that permits are required. And then I've also looked, you know, and I know that Joel, he might not agree, but you know, I think that when people sell their property, there's a questionnaire on the property disclosure. Is, you know, are there any special features, or are you in any district where certain rules apply? And we can argue whether or not, but I think that owners need to put, you know, sellers need to put potential buyers on notice that they're buying property. You know, we try to stick to realtors, and it's not the realtor's problem. We try to stick to title company, and it's not the title company's problem to hold those people's hands. But anyway, it's a tough deal. They're halfway through, but I'm not going to vote. I mean, I'm going to vote to uphold this tonight. I guess my main thing as the liaison is I wanted to make sure that they were treated fairly, and I feel they were. I mean, it's a horrible mistake, but I don't think that they were treated unfairly in the process. So I yield. Thanks.
Bonnie Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to ask the applicant a question. And you want to go up to there?
Yes, Ms. Peterson.
You had brought the price difference of the different doors, but you didn't address the cost burden, because here it says that really the applicant needs to do additional investigation of prudent and feasible alternatives to minimize adverse effect to historic property. But do you have other figures to show the difference of it being an extreme burden to you?
Different sightings?
Well, of the sidings versus painting.
Yes, I have
restoring, because you ran out of time, so I just wanted to know.
I do have an estimate for painting, and the estimate for painting was $18,857 per building. I did an estimate for composite siding, and that was $13,000 when you go adding the doors, the total of all the construction being done. My budget for the vinyl siding was $7,150. With the fiberglass door, you add another $1,250 onto that to do a wood door. Because the vinyl siding was $2,700, the composite siding is $5,400, $5,450. The painting estimate that was given to me was $18,857.
Is that for both buildings or one building?
One building. That had to do with removal, abatement, removal of materials.
Because of lead-based paint?
Because of the year, I was told, yes, it has to be somebody lead-based certified. If I was to do it myself, I have to become lead-based certified. I could do it myself once, but in 5 years, when it needs it again, I wouldn't be able to do it personally. I mean, the hard part is that I investigated with who was supposed to tell me as well, because it wasn't the title company. I talked to them, and it wasn't their responsibility. It's not the realtors. Obviously, it's the sellers. I said, well, there should be some kind of a red flag here, something that before you buy property, that you are aware of the restrictions, just like you are with a homeowners association. I mean, that's a part of the buying of the process. And there was no notification to me about this at all. So we are over half done with the siding. So if I tear it all off, we're going to have more damage to the building. By tearing it all off, it's going to be that material that's wasted. What material is left on the ground, I'm going to be lucky if I get 50 cents on the dollar for.
And how much siding is already, the vinyl
60% of it is put on.
60%,
more than 60%.
60% on one house?
Yes.
Has already been done. And your price, the $7,150, that was included the vinyl and the...
that was the siding, the fiberglass doors, the repairs, and the materials.
And the labor to put it on?
Yes.
Okay, so I agree that vinyl has no place in the historic district, and at the same time, you have 60% of it done.
Also, there are multiple buildings in the surrounding, within a block radius, that have vinyl siding.
Right. So we're kind of in a catch-22, because it's like if we let you continue with the siding, then it's kind of like, then you play a cat and mouse game to allow, so then the secret is get as much done before you're caught.
Oh, okay.
But like I said, I'm against vinyl siding in that area, but at the same time, I feel bad for you that you have 60%. Can you already on the house? So,
and the other alternative is to leave it like it is. And you can, if you saw the building next door, it's so dilapidated, the paint's all peeling off. The 11th Street apartment had been painted 5 years ago. It's all peeling off. It is in the packet of photos that was submitted on a previous meeting. These are low-income rental properties, and to make them look nice, this was the only financially feasible way for me to do it. Mm-hmm. I cannot afford to paint it now and paint it again in 5 years. I talked to the man across the street. He said he paints his house every 5 years, 2 years on the front half, 2 years on the back half, and 1 year off. With rental property, you need things that are withstanding, and that's why the vinyl siding, it will contain the paint. The vinyl siding is the most financially conducive to put on. Yes, we were wrong to have started it, but unfortunately, just because of naivety of not being aware. I had no idea that this commercial property would be part of this auspice of the regulations of the Historic Preservation Society.
Bonnie, any further questions?
So we're talking about, because the other house already has vinyl on it, right?
No, I was looking for approval for both buildings. This is one of the two buildings that are side by side or cornered.
Okay, because at Legal and Finance, it seemingly showed us a building that already had vinyl siding on it.
Right, that's the one that's the 60% completed, or a little more.
Okay. I guess I'm done with my...
Just for the record, which one, so we're all on the same page, which one is the one that's 60% completed?
Kansas City.
Kansas City, okay. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Well, I can't make any motions at this point, and I don't know, I feel bad for you. Maybe one of my colleagues will have a solution. Thank you.
Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to actually take a second here and think about this before I talk.
Verity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not a solution, I'm sorry, but I am wondering, I don't know if it'd be staff or Ms. Kesloff I should direct the question to, so I'll ask it and perhaps you can help. I am curious why we don't get to see when one of these appeals comes forward a layout of where the district is and these identified properties that are on that register so that we can see, well, there's vinyl here, not here, and then it's this one little historic property in a sea of vinyl. I think that would help us in determining whether it fits with the immediate neighborhood. And Ms. Kesloff, if I may, if you can speak to that, not as far as bringing that forward, but as far as what that looks like for us, because we haven't heard anything directly from the commission.
And we'll go to Jean Kesloff, one of our Historic Preservation Commissioners. Good evening, Jean.
Hi. Could you say that again, Charity? I kind of got lost when you were asking the boundaries. Is that what it was that you were asking, or?
With respect to Ms. Fuss's properties, what do the historical properties around it look like, or are there none? Is it two little isolated properties? Because she said there's a lot of vinyl in the area. I'm just wondering, is it one of these weird shaped districts, or what does it look like over there?
It's the historic district. Unfortunately, until about a year ago, there was no building permit required for vinyl siding. So a lot of the structures had vinyl siding put on them before the ordinance was changed. So that's why there are, houses, structures here and there that do have vinyl siding on them.
Okay, so if she had done this a year ago, it would be legal and non-conforming at this point?
She wouldn't have had to have a building permit, so she wouldn't have had to come before the Preservation Commission.
Okay, and why was that changed?
I don't know why it was changed. It was changed when the International Code, the proper term I don't know, but in a sense to protect the historic district, because once you change out windows and siding, you lose the house as a contributing structure.
Can you speak, Ms. Kesloff, to there were 5, I believe, contributing factors to her historic properties that she mentioned at last Legal and Finance, and siding didn't appear to be one of them. Can you speak to that at all for us?
Siding is always a defining feature of an architectural style. The list that she had are items that can be, like the pediment over the doorway, the fenestration of the windows. Those are just examples. It was not all inclusive, and siding is most a defining feature of an architectural style.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield.
Floor has been yielded. We'll go to Steve Laurenti. Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a substitute motion, one that allows the Kansas City property to be finished as planned and the other property denied. If I can get a second.
We have a motion by Laurenti and a second by Peterson to allow the 1107 Kansas City Street to be approved, to overturn the denial, and to uphold the denial of siding and door replacement for 703 11th Street.
Yes, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
and you have the floor.
Thank you. And I've been listening, and I remember this at the Legal and Finance meeting, of course, and I was already thinking this. I'd hoped that somebody would already make the motion, but I'm glad to do it. I think it's a fair response to the situation that we're in. Maybe the property owner has the ability to go back on the seller because that wasn't disclosed. That may or may not be a possibility, but we all know the cost just to bring probably a seller to court to make that happen would probably exceed the cost of the vinyl itself for both properties. And so I'm hoping that my colleagues will support this compromise. One, because not necessarily because we already have properties that have vinyl on them, although I think that's a mitigating factor here. But I think the owner has done what she could do once she found out, and I believe she's asking for, I shouldn't say she's asking for this because I'm not giving her everything she wants, obviously, but I think it's a compromise that we can maintain one of the homes in the historic district with all of its contributing factors, and we can mitigate a little bit of the losses for the homeowner for the other property in Kansas City. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone understands the motion? All in favor say aye. Opposed?
Here.
Okay. Roll call, please, Charlene.
Wright. Scott. Nordstrom. Roberts. Clayton. Laurenti. Estes. Peterson. Lewis. Doyle. Motion carries 8-2.
Thank you. Item number 56, it's a bid award consent item. We'll go to Chad Lewis for the reading of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 56 is the city staff recommends referring the Horace Mann Pool replacement project number 11-1942 CIP number 50864 to June 10th, 2014 Public Works Committee meeting. I move approval.
Okay, we have a motion to refer. Jeff Bagler, we're going to come to you in just a minute. You can get ready for a brief explanation of this. We have a motion to continue this to the June 10 Public Works meeting. Do we have a second?
So moved.
We have a second by Wright. We'll go to our Parks and Recreation Director, Jeff Bagler, for a brief explanation of this situation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you recall, I was here not too long ago seeking some additional funding for this project as the engineer's estimates came in at $6.8 million, and that was the advertising authority that was granted through City Council. The bids were opened last week for this project, and the bids came in considerably higher than that engineer's estimate. And in fact, it does reflect what we've been seeing, what the Public Works Department's been seeing in some of the other Public Works project when bids have been coming in around 20% higher than the engineer's estimate. And that's what we have in this instance. The bid came in about 20% higher than the engineer's estimate. So what we're asking for is a little bit of time to explore to see if we have additional funding sources to make up the shortfall or if there are other options available, such as a redesign to perhaps fit the existing budget for this project.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you. We are now on non-consent items 61 through 140A. We have speaker request forms on items 62 and 63. We'll first go to Joy McCracken to speak to us on item number 62. And while she's coming up, I'll read this into the record. Is to approve the requested CDBG policy changes, and that's Community Development Block Grant policy changes for fiscal year 2015. Joy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you for allowing me the opportunity for a couple of minutes to talk about Dakota Land Trust. The Community Land Trust are not new to our country. Actually, they originated over 30 years ago in the Northeast. It's an innovative housing method to serve low-income families with limited housing opportunities. The land trust owns the land, the homeowner owns the house, and leases the land through a 99-year ground lease. Taking the cost of the land out of the transaction makes it affordable. For example, we're working with a family today, has excellent credit, but they only qualify for $115,000. They chose land trust so they can invest their full $115,000 in the house. Otherwise, this would have been a $145,000 transaction. Dakota Land Trust offers homeownership opportunities to low-income families and individuals working in our community, therefore stabilizing our workforce. Homeownership greatly influences the social outlook of every member of any given household. Owning a home is often seen as a symbol of success. Homeownership also provides certain financial benefits along with the sense of security and independence. Unlike a rental, the prices that can go up and down for year after year, homeownership can make housing costs more predictable by having a mortgage payment that remains basically the same for a period of years. The adults in homeowners often are more active in the school activities and community activities. The children are given the opportunity to remain in the same school system, establishing long-term friendships and enjoying the constant environment that is so important to the healthy childhood development. Homeownership is important to families with limited income. However, keeping housing affordable is a challenge. Our housing prices are increasing faster than our wages. Dakota Land Trust is an innovative option and a method to assist in keeping homes affordable. It is a shared equity program that means that the homeowner agrees when they purchase the property that they will not take all the equity with them when they sell the property. The equity stays with the home, therefore the next time it is sold below market value, keeping our homes affordable for generations to come. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Joy. We'll now go to Tamara Peer for item number 63. While she's coming up, I'll read that into the record. That's to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign employment contracts between the city of Rapid City and 7 of our department directors. Tamara, the floor is yours. Good evening.
I am basically here to answer questions, if you have any, regarding the proposed department director contracts. I was retained last fall to draft a template for these contracts, and I did so by, in drafting them, I reviewed contracts from other communities and spoke with the department heads, developed a draft, and then ran that past the department heads to see any questions or concerns they had regarding those. The contract really is a condensation of all the non-union employee personnel provisions that apply to department heads into one contract or into one document. It is a document that changes one thing, which is the severance pay provision. Currently, the severance provisions for employees relates to the short-term disability policy. And under this, it would just be a flat, if an employee is terminated after they've worked for the city for at least 6 months, they would be entitled to a 6 months pay. And that's only in the situation where they are terminated for what I say political reasons. It doesn't apply if a person is terminated for just cause. The other thing is that, in my experience as a city attorney, and having observed these types of terminations through the years, generally what happens, we have a community where we have, as you know, 2-year terms for council members and for the mayor. That results, I think we could all agree, into a certain level of instability in our governmental structures, and as a result, the people who are department directors end up being the people who have the institutional memory and also some of the political liabilities from having served for a longer period of time. The longer they serve, more often, the more political detractors they obtain, and as a result, they are often terminated, not often terminated, I should say, those that are terminated for political reasons are usually employees that have served at least 10 years, which under the current policy would be 6 months. They would get a 6-month severance package anyway. So to the best of my knowledge and guess, and that's all I can do, I don't think it will cost the city any more in terms of money if employee is terminated for cause, generally, because of those circumstances. I think that those are the main issues I wanted to go over with you. And if you have questions later, I'd be glad to answer those. Again, it's just a conjecture on the severance issue. The one other matter that we do have under the draft agreement is that if an employee is terminated for other than cause, they will have to sign a liability waiver so that they can't sue the city if they get that 6 months of pay. So that is something that wasn't in the current policy and is a protection for the city also.
Thank you, Tamara. We do not have any further speaker request forms on this section of the agenda. Public comment is now closed. We will first go to item number 61, and we'll go to Chad Lewis for the reading of this item. Alderman Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 61 is the second reading of ordinance 5987 and supplemental appropriation number 2 for 2014. I move approval.
Motion by Lewis, second by Wright. Any discussion? Amanda Scott?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question for Pauline Sumption, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Pauline, were there any modifications, additions, or deletions from the original first reading?
No, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I yield the floor.
Any further discussion on item 61? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We are now on item number 62. Alderman Lewis.
Thank you, Mayor Quaker. Item number 62 is approved requested CDBG policy changes for fiscal year 2015. I make a motion to you that's rather lengthy. Recommend that the council approve recommendations numbers 1, 2, 5, and 6. Further recommend that for number 3, to promote permanent affordability of properties assisted with the CDBG funding by supporting the Dakota Land Trust. Council directs community development staff to meet with community stakeholders and other city staff to formulate specific policy for CDBG property funded placement in land trust. And for number 4, develop a plan for utilizing TIFs to support and the development of affordable housing for the low-income people through incentives, rewards, or requirements. And council direct planning development TIF staff to research possible programs and meet with community stakeholders and other city staff to formulate recommendations for TIF affordable housing guidelines.
Second.
That was just off the top of my head.
Can I make a recommendation to help ease the discussion? Is that the first part of it, if we could divide the question or divide this item, because you have half a dozen different items, and we approve. We'll maintain that as an option. If the discussion starts to weigh down, then we'll consider. Just
anybody looking for my motion? It's the recommendation on the linked item.
Okay. So the motion that was just read is basically printed in the cover memo.
It was off the top of my head, basically. Yes.
Okay. Very good. All right. Any discussion on that motion? Everyone understands it? We'll go to Bonnie Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, I think we'll all support this, but I also just wanted to remind us tonight on the 211, the community trends, that the number one unmet needs was housing. And so the city really needs to start on this long journey of getting innovative, providing housing for our people. And again, we know that the seniors are coming, and we need to, because I won't be here probably when you vote on these other parts, but that it's just extremely important that we start addressing these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know that this issue has generated a lot of conversation, and just to clarify, because I think it was so convoluted last meeting that anybody watching out there, I just want to make sure they understand. The simple recommendations are going to be approved, and then we're going to explore the Dakota Land Trust issue. And for those developers that were concerned about the utilizing TIFs to support this, that is actually just right now being recommended to, again, being explored, being put through the process so that we can see what that might look like before it comes back for final approval. So again, that issue is not getting decided tonight, it's just getting explored tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really excited about all these 4 recommendations getting adopted. The other 2 items, the land trust, I've been working on this for about a year, and hopefully that will be continued to be pursued. And item number 5, which has to do with the TIFs, I've been able to talk to a couple of developers who've talked to other developers who are very interested in doing a pilot program on that. And so with their input coming forward into the TIFs, they would like to have notice of when those meetings are going to be taking place. And Bonnie, if Alderman Woodman Peterson, we will try to do our best to carry on without you on these different projects. Thank you for your effort.
Any further discussion? Everyone understands the motion on 62. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 63, Chad.
Thank you, Mayor Quaker. Item number 63 is authorize mayor and finance officer to sign employment contracts between the city of Rapid City and Pauline Assumption, Brett Limbaugh, Terry Waltersdorf, Jeff Barbier, Joe Landine, Jeff Bigler, and Mike Malter, and I move approval.
A motion by Lewis and a second by Wright. Any discussion? Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to applaud Tim Rapier for doing the efforts behind the scenes on working on these contracts. And as noted by Steve Condrey, who did the assessment for the entire wage and benefits package for the city, has mentioned that these agreements are well written. And with his endorsement on this, I can wholeheartedly support the effort that's being brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie. Amanda Scott. Amanda.
Thank you, Mayor. It looks like this item is going to be approved tonight by everybody seconding it up here. So I just want to go on record, I'll be voting no tonight because I don't think I had enough time to get my questions answered. And I was actually going to ask for a continuation, but I don't think that'll go through either. So just so everybody knows why I'm voting no on this tonight, I would like more time to review it, and that doesn't look like it's going to happen. Thank you.
Alderwoman Charity Doyle. Charity.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Peer made a comment about the nature of department directors being in an unstable environment, and I just have to say that this council did approve extending term lengths. You know how that one turned out. So it's the question I'm faced with is whether to support this when, in fact, that stability was attempted and was passed by this council, or if we don't want to punish the department directors for that instability that we do have. The other thing I'm concerned about, and honestly, I mean, there are some department directors that I think are absolutely stellar, and I am concerned with some of that. I would never single anybody out, so don't ask me. But just that hesitancy to really embrace change and move things forward and look at things in new and different ways. I think the longer I'm around, the more I see that hesitancy. And so it does give me pause. Yeah, I like the concept of this stability and being able to attract strong candidates for these very stressful, very complicated positions. And honestly, as the vote comes down, I'm not sure what's going to come out of my mouth. Thank you.
Alderman Lewis.
Speaking of not knowing sure is going to come out of their mouths, it'd be me. And the fact of the matter is, I think that in this case, I felt very uncomfortable being placed in position with the Jerry Cole situation, where I was supposed to make a judgment after the fact based upon, evidence. He said, she said, whatever, and I didn't appreciate that as a council person. Even though I was elected to do it, it just made me uncomfortable, made it hard for me to kind of drew the line in the sand in a lot of ways with a lot of different people, and made everybody kind of adversarial towards each other. And I don't think that was good for the council. I think it was good for the community. So I appreciate the contracts, because it takes us out of the equation as much as possible, and I do appreciate that effort. So I think that the mayor's job is to administer, and these people serve at the pleasure of the mayor. And so I think this is something that we need to ensure that process. I understand that not everybody agrees with me on that, but I do really appreciate being taken out of this, because I don't think I'm supposed to sit here and manage city employees. I don't think it's my job. I do create the policy, but as far as the day-to-day goes, and I do think it's a lot easier to attract people to these jobs that are obviously very political if we do have some sort of protection in line for those people that are willing to relocate here, move their families here, and to have some sort of protection and reassurance for them. I think that just kind of is what the whole part of this process is, and I do appreciate this. So thank you very much.
Any further discussion? We'll go to Brad Estes. Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I enjoyed sitting with Attorney Tamara Peer and having her explain this. And I think anytime you can take the rules of engagement and reduce them to writing, takes away some confusion. I'm going to support this. I think this is a great place to start. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carries with 1 no from Amanda Scott. Item number 64. Chad.
Item number 64 is the city roofing permit process and inspection concerns by Ronna Graham. I move to acknowledge.
Okay, we have a motion by Lewis and a second by Wright to acknowledge. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to Amanda Scott.
Wrong item, Mayor, sorry.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We were in the middle of the vote when, okay.
I'm sorry.
I did not see. We have a motion to, rather than go through the whole rigmarole of reconsidering the motion, let's just declare the motion void, and if nobody's objecting to that, and we'll hear the discussion. Charity, you have the floor.
I was just going to say, Mr. Mayor, that this was an item from the public, and the complainant is here, obviously, at the podium to address her item, so I think we should.
We didn't have a speaker request for him, and I'm sorry, I just missed the item, so.
No, I mean, she's here for her
okay.
item.
All right, very good. I just didn't want it to appear that the council and I were intentionally missing a citizen. We were in the midst of the vote when you hit your light, and I was looking at you
Because
and
she
not
was
over here.
walking up.
So,
That's fine.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, ask your question. Thank you.
No, she's here to address her item.
Okay.
It's her item. I'm just asking, are you going to give her an opportunity to speak?
Okay.
That's all.
All right.
Just making sure you know
All
she
right.
was here.
We'll recognize our 3 minutes of public comment. Go ahead, Rihanna.
I think I've pretty much discussed everything in the legal and finance meetings that I've attended, except for I just want to really know how the city intend to unfinalize a permit, which they've already finalized in the first place, because nobody has actually explained that to me. Also, the issue that I've had with the professionalism of the staff. Bonnie Peterson made a comment or a question last Wednesday about how this got to this point and where I had to come in front of the legal and finance meeting and why it could not have been resolved previously. I believe it could have, and the reason I believe it could have is I have actually contacted the mayor's office on 3 occasions. Once I went in, and twice I actually left a message for you, Mr. Mayor, to contact me. And all 3 times that never happened. So I feel that if you had maybe contacted me, it could have been dealt with a lot sooner than me having to go through this and dealing with this. And what I'm asking is for this contractor to have his license pulled, because I believe if he's done this to me, the dishonesty, the lies, the deceit, he's going to do it again. And also, Joel, the city attorney, had also told Alderwoman Doyle last Wednesday he would contact me to tell me how I would go about doing this, and I've still not had a phone call from him either. And that's basically all I have left to say about this.
We'll now go ahead and close public comment, and now we will read the item into the agenda. I'll just go ahead and read it. We're on item 64, city roofing permit process and inspection concerns by Ron and Graham. And if we don't have do we have a motion? We have a motion by Lewis to acknowledge, and a second by Jerry Wright. All right, Jerry Wright.
All I would say is that, Mayor, would you visit with your staff and see if there's anything else we can or should do? I think otherwise the council has done everything we can do. I think that's why we're acknowledging the report at this level. Thank you.
We have several lights, and I'd like to address, if you don't mind, if I could try to answer your question. Brett Limbaugh is not here tonight, but I believe that he, Brad Solon's here, but I believe that, was it Brett or Brad that went out there and both? I mean, there has been an extensive amount of staff investment of time in this issue, and as far as the calls to my office, I mean, I've asked staff to try to move heaven and earth to try to work this situation out. As far as a request for a cancellation or a suspension of the license, we have by ordinance, we have a board that handles a contractor's licensing board that handles that, and that is something that this council could refer to that board for a request for a suspension hearing. We had another situation, it was out in Chapel Valley, where somebody had experienced a problem with their roofer, and that issue was perhaps equally as messy and problematic, and it went to that board, and that board has been working through that issue, and they're a talented board. And so I would say that part of the problem that we've had here is that there's several different issues here, but if we can try to boil down the issue, if we take a look at the issue of contractor responsibility, if the contractor needs to be suspended, then that's a hearing that needs to be held by the contractor licensing board. But as far as the calls coming into my office, our staff, not my staff, but our staff has spent a lot of time on this, and this has been a difficult situation. So with that being said, we'll go to our two council lights. We'll go first to John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Brad, since you're here, can I ask you a couple of questions? Bolt Construction, have they had a lot of complaints? From what I know from Bolt Construction, this isn't too common. So I'm guessing you haven't, I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'm just asking a question. Have you had more complaints like this from Bolt Construction?
No, we haven't had a number of complaints about Bolt Construction.
Okay. Because I would recommend that we do take this to that board, but I don't see what the outcome is going to be from that. I mean, if it's an isolated event, I think that from what I read here, it looks like one of the big problems that we're having is roofers doing work on weekends when your staff can't go out and inspect them. I think that's one of the, but we as a city can't afford to put on more staff or the amount of staff that it would take to be out there until 9 o'clock at night during the week in the summer when, you know, they can roof until and on the weekends. So we're just kind of in a catch-22 here. What do we do? You know, do we put on more staff because we've got a couple of isolated incidences? Or do we come up with, you know, a way to maybe fine these people a little bit more than double the permit fee? So they don't, you know, they take it a little more seriously. You know, $80 isn't much of a slap on the hand, but if we find them $500 for not getting the proper building permits, that might be a good slap on the hand. So I think that we need to discuss this more, have some recommendations, and maybe take a look at that ordinance and maybe put a little more teeth into it. Thank you.
Was there a question in that? No, I'm done. You're done? All right. Bonnie Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I hope what I'd said at Legal and Finance last week was that we need to provide customer service training to our employees, especially the employees that go out in the field. And I hope that you will put that in the budget for the 2015 budget. Because Ms. Graham, even though there were lots of mistakes and he said, she said, she had numerous issues which did show a lack of professionalism for our staff. And our staff is near perfect, but we need to make sure that they're 99.9% perfect and not just 90% perfect. And especially training for these kind of situations where you know, there's been some problems with a person and you need to still be able to interact with them in a positive manner. And so anyway, our staff definitely needs some training on that. And that requires the council and the mayor's leadership to make sure that they do get customer service training on a routine basis. Because we all work for our citizens, and so there's really no excuse for lack of professionalism with our citizens. So I think that's the biggest hurdle. I don't know who on staff is going to walk Ms. Graham through what she needs to do, or if she needs to do anything to get the building permit unfinalized. As she said, I believe she asked that she needed to know what needed to be done. And so if someone could, does anyone want to volunteer on staff to do that?
We'll go to our city attorney, Joel Landine. Joel.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I don't know that she's going to like the answer. I mean, at this point, there's not really a lot for us to do. The permit is unfinalized because it wasn't done properly. Now it needs to be repaired. Under normal circumstances, the contractor who performed the work would come back, correct it so it passed or met the requirements, and then we would final the permit again. And they would do that at their own expense, I would think. But Ms. Graham has made very clear that bolt roofing or bolt construction is not allowed on her property, so that isn't going to happen. Now, she also has hired other contractors to come out and look at the roof, so I'm assuming she's intending on getting the roof repaired. And then I don't know exactly where she's at in her dispute with bolt construction, but I'm guessing that part of that, when it gets resolved, is going to be who pays for all this. But at this point, it's unfinalized. She's going to need to retain somebody to correct it. And then once it's corrected, they can come back in and the permit will go out and inspect it and the permit will be finalized at that point.
Okay, so it's been unfinalized. And so, Ms. Graham, you have the choice, I guess, of working with your different contractors, but that would not be the city's, the city would not be involved with that part, right?
Right. I mean, we can't tell her who to fix a roof.
Right.
I mean, if it was me and it hadn't gotten to that point, I would call up my contractor and say, look, this got unfinalized, come fix it. But obviously she does not want this person on her roof again or on her property even, so that isn't going to happen.
Okay.
So somebody else is going to have to perform the work.
And so in that, then it becomes between Ms. Graham and whatever contractor that she wants to work with. The city is not involved in that part.
No, it's whoever she wants to have do the work.
Okay. Do you understand?
I do.
I'd like to, before we continue the discussion, I want to make sure that we're careful here, because there are two businesses in Rapid City with the name that was just mentioned tonight. Two businesses, both that have employees, one that has a lot of employees, and I think we need to be very careful about this. This is why we have a building board to handle a hearing like this. And I think if we're going to continue this discussion about the conduct of the roofer, because last week this was about the conduct of staff, and now it's shifted to about the conduct of the roofer. And if we're going to talk about the conduct of the contractor, we need to get a substitute motion on the floor to take this to the appropriate board and not have any more discussion in a direct or indirect way about the performance of the contractor when they're not here to defend themselves, and we're going to end up with due process issues. So that's what I would like to say is I really think where we need to go is, if there's going to be any more discussion about the roofer, there should be a substitute motion to refer this to the appropriate board.
Well, I understand your concerns, because I personally would have never said the name of the other, who the discussion was about, but I don't have any plans to talk about the contractor other than the contractor. And I was just wanting to know if Ms. Graham understood that the city is not involved with so I can because I've talked, but someone else could make the substitute motion, and then I could continue my questioning. But to me, this is about staff. It's about staff saying they're going to contact Ms. Graham, and they don't. Staff potentially being rude. The mayor's office, 3 calls, and no one called back from the mayor's office. And I understand that. So to me, this is about staff. And I understand sometimes, Mayor, that you direct staff to contact instead of a direct call, but it seemed like someone would have told her that they're calling in, because the mayor asked them to. So I just think to me, this is about staff. It's not about the contractor, because that is Ms. Graham's right. She can bring forward this complaint to the contractors board. And so can someone tonight, staff, talk to her about who she needs to contact about that?
Yes.
Okay, tonight before she leaves, that'd be great. Because we have great employees, but obviously Ms. Graham has shown us some weak links in our system, and we need to use this as an opportunity not to beat up on staff, but to help our staff improve. And that's why I think this is important, because, like I said earlier, that we all work for our citizens, and we need to be professional with dealing with them. And I think that's all I have to say, other than I guess I did ask you a question, Ms. Graham, if you understood that the city has unfinalized the permit, and then it's up to you to find who's going to finish your job.
I wasn't aware they had unfinalized it. I know it was in the report, but again, I haven't been contacted by anyone to tell me an update of what's taken place. I do have contractors, but unfortunately, until the lien was removed, I cannot get my roof fixed because I can't afford to pay 2 companies.
And I agree. I think, and Joel, if you could verify that that's really not, the city is not involved in that at all, about the lien, and we
Right,
have no...
I mean, that's going to have to work. I mean, it seems to me now there's multiple legal claims. There's the contractor's claims for getting paid. There's Ms. Graham's claims for the work and probably getting some of that money refunded. So that's going to have to resolve itself in the legal system. And then she'll have to make decisions based on the outcome of that.
So, Ms. Graham, it doesn't help you one iota, but I do appreciate you pointing out some flaws in our system, because I've worked with our department heads, employees for 4 years now, and I think really they're very outstanding as a whole, but I'm sorry for your particular situation. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to kind of bring this back to the whole point. I remember the first time Ms. Graham brought this forward, she was asking for the process to be tightened up so that it didn't happen again. This has happened to her multiple times, same issues, permitting issues, inspection issues, and this time it resulted in a situation where the work was not done properly. So her escrow account would not release the funds until the work was done properly. She reached out to the contractor to have the work finished and completed, and for whatever reasons, that didn't happen. And so the funds weren't being released. The contractor comes back and says, you need to pay me. Well, you need to fix the work. That doesn't happen. The permit is finalized in the meantime. The contractor goes and files a lien. This report, I mean, her claims were founded that the whole thing with the permitting, the inspection process, if the findings of the report and unfinaling the permit, if it had never been finalized in the first place until the work was done properly, she would not have a lien filed against her. And I think that's what we're all forgetting. And she didn't come here asking for anything to do with the lien. She just asked that the process be tightened up so this didn't happen to another person again. And, you know, I've heard all kinds of things. You know, I've heard some pretty negative speak I really don't appreciate from people, you know, like the comments about being a troublemaker and just out to do. I mean, this is a person who is stuck in limbo with her property, can't get it fixed. The money is there, but there's this dispute. And I think that we did facilitate that. We set the environment for that simply because of our process. So I think to really enact due diligence, we need to examine this process. Is it an isolated case? If it's not, what can we do to make sure that these things don't happen again? I mean, this is going to be a very costly, lengthy process for her. And the question that I go every time I go back to is, would this have happened if the permit had never been finalized, or if the permit had been issued properly in the first place, and the inspection had never been, or however they work this? But there are obvious questions. So I think the report is one thing, and I appreciate staff. I know you spent a lot of hours interviewing people and putting this together, but it's not going to be worth anything unless we do something with these findings so that we can make sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again. And we have to get back to the purpose that she brought this forward. Please, thank you.
Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for Ms. Graham, if you can, please. When did you first in this, I'm looking at the events and the dates of the events. When were the contacts made with the mayor's office?
I believe it was the first couple of times was last year when I was going through the first dispute with my deck. And I was told that they were going to pull the license of this contractor, but they didn't. We actually went into the mayor's office and spoke to a gentleman called Mike, and he took our name and numbers down. And then we hadn't heard anything back after a week, so we actually called and spoke to the same gentleman. And he told us that the mayor would contact us. Again, we didn't. And then when the situations,
So
sorry.
when was it approximately?
It was, I'm trying to remember, I can't remember the exact date. It would have been between, I think, March and June of last year, when I had bread and brat at my house.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to know that because the fact of the matter is I've never heard that I've never heard what you said this evening and all of the times that you have presented the facts of what's all happened in this particular, in the itinerary of this whole thing. This is the first time I've heard that particular statement you've made tonight about contacting the city 3 times and getting no response. But however, based on the fact that the city has, let me just reframe this a little bit. I think last time we had this in front of us, we were given some context on how many permits are given. And I think what the people of Rapid City need to know is this is extremely isolated. If I remember right, it was 2 or 3 or 4 of 800 permits. Somebody can correct me on that if you remember the. So let's keep that in context. It's unfortunate, of course, that Ms. Graham has had some of the experience she's had with some city staff and unfortunately with her contractor, but that's outside of the city purview. The fact of the matter is this inspection process, obviously there may be some things we can do as a group to improve the process, but that again is another thing for another night, and I'm hoping that we'll have that discussion. But the fact of the matter is, when Ms. Graham first came to the council, and I think it was Legal Finance about a month ago, I spoke with Alderwoman Doyle about this situation after the meeting, and I specifically said, isn't this something that needs to go to the Board of Appeals? And for some reason, you still haven't seen the Board of Appeals, although you have council people advocating on your part. And this item has been brought to us by, I'm not going to say it was by Alderman Doyle, but the fact of the matter is, I had a conversation with some council people on your behalf, if you will, saying this needs to go to the Board of Appeals. So why, ma'am, you have council people who've been advocating for you this whole time, and you still don't know what you needed to do to get to the Board of Appeals is a little, it upsets me a little bit, because I had this conversation the first time you came to Legal and Finance, and yet nobody on this council has helped you get to that point, and I think that should have happened. So that would have helped a lot, and we would have saved a lot of staff time as well. I'm just a little disturbed that you have council people advocating for you, but unfortunately you haven't gotten to the Board of Appeals yet. And I believe that's the process where this needs to go, and I'm hoping that motion is made, because this complaint, your complaint, needs to be lodged so that it is to be recorded in case there are other situations with this particular contractor. That needs to be there. And so I'm again going to tell you that you need to speak with your advocates, and you should have already been at the Board of Appeals a long time ago. So I apologize to you that you're not getting that kind of service, and I relinquish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I'm not convinced we have a system that's broke. I don't think that this tells us that what we've got going on with our roofing permits, that the system is broke, and I don't think we want to make it any more cumbersome than it is. You know, we don't want people to have roofs exposed and rain coming and be sitting there and waiting for inspectors to show up. But, you know, when I look at the code book on roofs, you know, it talks about 2 things, ice and water shield. You know, you start at the bottom and you work your way up, and you got ice and water shield that goes in 2 feet beyond the wall, and the shingles are supposed to be installed per the manufacturer's recommendations. It's not our inspectors' jobs to have a full understanding of the manufacturer's recommendations on every product there is, because then we get involved in that, then we start affecting the warranty. This is just crazy. And then how we can pull an acceptance based upon the starter strip. I mean, our inspectors aren't there to watch the starter strip, and we don't put inspectors on the roof. You know, we inspect minimum standards. I can take you on a street where there's 3 houses being framed, and we can walk through and you'll go, oh, that's nice, and all 3 of them will meet the minimum standards, but there's probably a significant difference in the quality of the work on all 3 of them. But they meet the minimum standards. And if we want to get into judging what's pretty and all that stuff, that's up to the person writing the check, and we got to stay out of that. You know, I just think that, I think we just got drug into something here that I don't, you know, if somebody was treated poorly by city staff, that needs to be handled. But as far as our inspectors inspecting work, we look at it, and if it meets the minimum standards, that's all we get involved with. Thanks, I yield.
Jerry Wright.
Unfortunate, and Steve walked out, that we're attacking each other up here over this issue because it shouldn't happen. I think my original direction that we acknowledge the report and turn it over to staff to take corrective action is appropriate, and we're done with it. We've done all we can in defense of Charity. Her action with Rena was that she represents her as an alderman and a neighbor. I was brought in, and I think the action we took initially was correct. It came to us for information, and now it's up to the mayor and staff to do what they can do, and they can't solve it all. We're not liable for everything. There's nothing more we can do as a council. We've heard it. Hopefully we're going to see some corrective action in our process of permitting and so forth, and do a better job next time. Do what we can do and move on. Thank you.
Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to talk about this. I did talk about it, legal and finance. Once again, and Brad said a lot of what I was going to say is regarding the ability of inspectors to have some leeway in the field, and we're not going to be able to ensure every single starter strip is the one the manufacturer specified. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat when it comes to that sort of thing. And the old school way is definitely not the manufacturer's way, but it seems to have worked. And I would urge anybody to look around the city, see how many actual catastrophic failures we've had due to lack of inspections by our inspection staff. I don't get along with those guys all the time just because it's the nature of the business, but fact of the matter is I find them always to be pretty fair guys. They usually will do their best to work with you. They're not out to get you, but at the same time, they're also looking to protect the public as much as possible. That's their job. So I don't know. And then we've dragged some people's names through the mud tonight that I really don't think was fair at all, and I want to apologize to that contractor in particular because they're not here to defend themselves. Obviously, there's people that feel they didn't do their job correctly, but that's not something that should have been discussed up here, in my opinion. We should have done that off the dais. And I think the staff has done an admirable job of looking into this situation, doing the best they can to deal with it. And as far as, once again, the building inspection, it's completely impractical to think that we're going to suddenly put people on every single roof every time a roof gets, it's basically, it's not going to happen. We need a mechanism, more or less, to deal with people that come into town and doing a really bad job. We have a lot of complaints with, like we did, like the guy that did the mayor's house. Guys like that need to have their licenses pulled. We need to have that mechanism so the minimal, get a license thing and have to pay the $40 fee. I think that's what we're looking to do, is regulate and have some ability to enforce it. But it's completely impractical. It would just it would slow it down so much if we had to be up there every single time. And what we'd have to charge the contractors and the people to make that happen, to inspect every single roof all the way, it just isn't practical. I think that we do a pretty good job as it is. Like I said, I heard there's actually numbers like 2,500 roofs that were done out there if you include the commercial stuff. And so, once again, I apologize those people's names have been dragged through the mud tonight. I don't think that's fair to them, so thank you.
Charity Doyle.
Thank you once again, Mr. Mayor. I agree with most of what Chad said, but the fact is that as per the report, there are a specific set of photos that are required so that we don't have to be up on the roof, so that when the affidavit is presented to the city, the photos accompany that, and it shows the work at the different stages. This didn't happen in this case. There were no photos supplied until 6 months later, and the photos don't even show the right thing as per the report they are supposed to show. So we still accepted them. So clearly, maybe, with our 800 or so roofs that we're doing, this issue still needed to be made right. I want to thank Jerry for rushing to my defense. It's not the first time I've been attacked up here by somebody who doesn't have all the facts, but, I have been advocating and giving her that information. We were told that, Mr. Laurenti, for your benefit, that only Brad could pull that license and put it through the Board of Appeals. And so she's been asking, can we get that process going? And it's just never happened. So the question at Legal and Finance that I posed to Joel was, can you get in contact with her and help her if it's something she needs to do that, or if it's something that Mr. Solon needs to do, just so she has that information. The call never took place. So, I think there's enough
blame to go around, and I'm really sick of the finger pointing up here. But, you know, this whole thing is just getting absolutely ridiculous. And I have to say, Ms. Graham, I have a feeling that nothing's going to be done with your issue, and I'm sorry.
I have a question for our Chief Building Inspector, Brad Solon. And Brad, my question is this, we've seen citizen disputes with contractors before, and they've been referred to the Building Code Board of Appeals where a complaint is filed and the hearing is held. How is this any different? And can we please get the hearing scheduled so that both sides can be heard by the board that's qualified to do it, and we do it as soon as possible? Can you answer that for me?
The agenda for the next building board meeting is set. It's next Tuesday. I think that the building board has a set of rules that they've adopted. I'd have to review that. I think that if Ms. Graham gets the a complaint into me by next Monday, they could be on the second Tuesday in July.
Okay.
No problem.
Say that one more time, the second
Tuesday of July.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Joel.
just so you know, I had Brad go get a complaint form while we were sitting here. I have handed the complaint form to Ms. Graham, and I have asked her, she said she's going to fill it out, and she will give it to me before the meeting tonight. Wait for it. I'll provide it to Brad in the morning so she can be on the agenda of the meeting he's referring to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item 65. Chad Lewis. Item 65.
Item number 65 is the appeal of the abatement for a sum of $172 for snow removal at 1016 Haynes Avenue by Verla Crago. I move denial.
We have a motion by Lewis and a second by Laurenti for denial. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item number 66. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 66 is a request for direction from the council regarding an annexation of property south of Catron Boulevard between Tartan Court and South Dakota Highway 79, and I move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Nordstrom and a second by Lewis. Any discussion? We'll go to Jerry Wright. Jerry?
Our counsel has left the room. I was going to ask him to briefly present to the council the process of what would begin now when we give this direction forward.
Vicki knows.
Vicki? All right, Vicki, you can do it. Thank you.
I came prepared. There is an involuntary annexation procedure that follows state law, and it's a 16-step process. The first step is to come to you folks and to get direction as to whether or not you would like the staff to start proceedings. What that means is that we're going to go back and we have to do a study. As a part of that study, we'll bring forward a document known as a resolution of intent to annex. There are 8 items that need to be addressed as a part of that study, whether or not we have infrastructure to service it, whether or not we have services such as fire department or police to service it, what's going to impact their taxes, and the list goes on. Once that document is complete, we then set it for hearing. We notify the property owner. We have to notify the County Board of Commissioners because it is an unplatted parcel for the most part. That comes through Planning Commission, it goes through Legal and Finance, and to Council. Once the resolution is approved, we then start over with the actual annexation proposal. Again, the property owner is brought into that. The county commissioners, again, are brought into that. That goes back to Planning Commission, Legal and Finance, and City Council. So it's a several-month process, and at this point, before there's any notification to the property owner, it's just really getting that direction from the council. Is this something you want us to look at? Because putting that study together takes time.
Questions answered?
Question answered.
Excellent. We'll go to Alderman Steve Laurenti. Steve. We'll go to Richie Nordstrom. Were you going to speak? Oh, okay. All right, we'll go to Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. I note that was it today that we got an objection letter from Lazy P. I just wonder if I may ask Vicki a question on that letter. Does that follow us through the process or follow you through the process, that objection letter?
It's already linked.
I understand that, but the next steps is the 16 steps. Does that objection letter follow in conjunction with that study?
That letter will go into the file, the annexation file that we will create if the council directs us to proceed. And all public comment, including those from the property owner, will be attached as every item goes forward. So yes, it will be attached to the resolution to intent and the actual annexation application.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone understands it? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now on alcohol beverage license and related licenses, items 67 through 140. Pauline, is there anything that needs to be separately considered? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the entire section?
Second.
Motion by Peterson, second by Jerry Wright to approve items 67 through 140. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item 140A, this is a staff item. I'll go ahead and read this. This is to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign resolution 2014-59, a resolution to declare an emergency and authorize repairs to the roof of Fire Station 6, which is down on South Highway 16, 1930 Promise Road. We have a motion by Lewis, second by Wright to approve. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We are now on public hearing items 141 through 152. Public hearing is open. I do not have any speaker request forms. We'll now close public hearing. We'll take items 141 through 150. Are there any items for separate consideration? We'll go to Amanda Scott. Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask Assistant Chief Carl Jaggeris a question, please?
You may.
Interim Police Chief Carl Jaggeris. Sorry about that. I should have used your correct title at this point. Carl, do you have any concerns over 147 or 148? When I reviewed these, it seemed like the background checks on all of these came back, except there was some criminal activity on 147 and 148. Do you have any concerns on those two?
You mean 148 and 149 or 147 and
147 and 148.
Okay.
No, we don't have any concerns on either of those.
All right. I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you. I yield the floor.
All right. And we do have a motion on the floor. Motion by Peterson, second by Wright on items 141 through 150. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. You're now on non-consent public hearing items 151 and 152. Let's go ahead and, Chad, if you want to read item 151 into the record for us, please.
I would like nothing more. Item number 151 is second reading of ordinance 5992, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning within described property as requested by Spearlet Consulting, Inc. for Shriner, Inc. Investments, LLC, from general agricultural district to low-density residential district, properly generally described as being approved west of existing intersection in Chanapis Drives and Medicine Ridge Road. I move approval.
A motion by Lewis and a second by Laurenti. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item number 152, Chad?
Thank you, Mayor Quaker. Item number 152 is Resolution 2014-043B, levying assessment for the cleanup of miscellaneous property, and I move approval.
Motion by Lewis, second by Laurenti. Pauline Sumption.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We actually need to remove number 23 as Mr. Wellman paid today.
So amended.
Okay. That's okay with the seconder? All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 53, bill list. Pauline.
We do have one addition to the bill list to the U.S. Bank Trust National Association for water main easements for the Garland Ennin Family Trust and the Louise Alice Ennin Trust for $27,636.65, bringing the new grand total to $6,571,744.07.
We have a motion by Lewis and a second by Peterson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We have a motion to adjourn. We have a motion by Wright and a second by Scott. All in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're adjourned. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.